Welcome back, everyone. So, raise your hand if it's Thursday, April 13th, right? We're here for the, great, awesome. Hi, come on in, how are you? We're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Danny Ledesma. This is our sort of third RESJ Community Advisory Committee meetings. As you know, these are public meetings. This is an opportunity for our amazing community advisory members to provide input both to the superintendent and to the school board about issues relating to policy and practices around equity. Today, unfortunately, the superintendent is not able to be here, has jury duty. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. And then we'll give a chance for everyone to do some introductions. I was just asking, like, when was the last time that we met? And it was in January. It feels like so long ago, and also feels like yesterday. So welcome back. Thank you to our committee members. We've got a really great group of staff who are going to be presenting information to each of you. So today we're going to do a land acknowledgement, as is our practice. We're then going to work with folks from the Office of Student Support Services, from the MTSS department, the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support group. And if you remember in our retreat, we asked sort of like what was most interesting to you in terms of prioritizing what you wanted to give feedback and learn more about. So discipline data, and we wanted to also give you an update around our responses to hate speech and to bias incidents. So today we're going to talk about those two things. We have an all-star group of staff who are going to come and talk about our discipline data, but also talk about some changes that we're making to change the way that we respond, and really trying to develop more of a culture of restorative justice, and to really try to create some better approaches to dealing with disproportionate discipline. So we'll be looking at that. Then Will from our team is going to talk about our policies around responses to hate speech and to bias incidents. Going to give some real updated information about what we're doing now. After both of these presentations, we want those to be sort of short and sweet. We gave you some just some light reading, some pre-reading around our discipline data, but the hope is that we can spend some time in discussion, getting your feedback, your impressions, your thoughts, questions, but also if there's any experiences that you want to share, either about the students that you're working with, your own experience as students or family members, and then we'll go ahead and close our meeting and move on. So I'm going to turn over to Will Fernandez and our team to lead our land acknowledgements, and then we'll jump into our next agenda.
Jasmine's actually.
Oh, Jasmine Jenna is going to be doing the land acknowledgement.
Everyone, my name is Jasmine Jenna. I'm one of the professional development program managers for the RESJ team. We always like to start out with an acknowledgement to good visibility. So if you'll take a couple of minutes to read the statement on the screen.
Let me know when you're ready for the next.
Also wanted to include a slide about the pronunciation. I think that could be a missed opportunity, so if you'll take a moment to read through. If you're like me and you're not from Portland, you moved here recently, also thinking about further reflection questions on where you were, who were the original indigenous people on the land where you were before, or which tribes of indigenous peoples in your area are federally recognized, how many tribes in your area are not recognized, what, if any, treaties are in place between these indigenous peoples and federal or local governments, who are the indigenous people on the land where your ancestors. So hopefully, after reading this land acknowledgement, ask some further questions to research at home so that we're able to view and give visibility to federally recognized, so local governments.
Thank you, Jasmine. Before we call up our first speakers, why don't we do some introductions so that our speakers know who you are. So if you wouldn't mind giving in your introduction, telling us your name, if you're a student, what grade you're in, and telling us your gender pronouns. So we'll start here and we'll end with Rudy, and then we'll ask speakers as they come up to introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lidia Lopez Gamboa, and I'm the Racial Equity and Social Justice Project Manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Ledesma. I'm the Senior Advisor for Racial Equity and Social Justice.
Hi, I'm Julie. I am student at the
My name is Marte Brown, but I prefer to be called Marte. I am the RJ coordinator at Beaumont Middle School, and I'm pronouns he.
Good evening, I'm Ernie Guerrero, he, him pronouns. I'm the program director at Step Up.
Hi, my name is Jessica Montes, I'm an outreach coordinator with Youth Connection Services.
Hi, I'm Anna Marquez. I'm a parent of a student at Buckley Green Middle School.
I'm Rudy Duncan. I'm 6th grade at Kell Middle School, and I use he, him.
Awesome. So I think the first thing we're going to do is have a school climate presentation, and that is going to be by the fabulous Chandra, who is our Senior Director of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, or MTSS.
Yes, and Danny, what you got?
Yeah,
Send over there?
yeah.
Okay. I have all the students here. So, hello, everyone. As Danny said, I'm Chandra Cooper. I use she, her pronouns. Senior Director of MTSS Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And it's really great to be here this evening. Thank you for the invite. We have, I think, about 15 minutes, if I remember, on the agenda to share a little bit about our work that's happening within the MTSS department. Everything that you're going to hear from our team either directly impacts or indirectly impacts school climate, which also impacts discipline and behavior, which I understand is the topic. So I thought before I turn it over to my team, Lydia, if we could go to the first slide. I just thought we could take some time. I want to ground us in what MTSS, or Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, is. And I just want to acknowledge that in education, I know we use a lot of acronyms. So I just want to make sure we can ground in what MTSS is. There's a lot of print that's going to be up here on the right, and I'm not going to get into that. So just focus on the visual. But when you hear tiered systems of support, we simply mean that our ultimate goal is to meet the needs of every student, regardless of the level of those needs. So we want to meet the needs of all students, regardless of the level of need. So if you look at the top of the pyramid, and this is a fairly universal visual that we use for MTSS, but if you look at the top of the pyramid, call this tier 1. And it's the biggest part of the pyramid because this is where all students should be able to access the core in both academics and behavior, or climate. We also refer to this tier 1 as the preventative and proactive. So a lot of what my team is going to talk about in the next 15 minutes or so really focuses on these systems and structures. Because what we know is if we can do this really well, if we can make sure that our schools have the systems and structures around tier 1, that will have a positive correlation on the discipline and behavior that we see across our school and in our classrooms. So if we narrow that down to tier 2, you might have heard of tier 2 interventions or tier 2 strategies. So what we know is that some of our students just need more time, more practice, and maybe even reteaching. And so tier 2 is when we provide that extra time for those strategies and interventions. Again, it's both on the academic and the climate side. And finally, if we narrow it even further, a fewer group of students in tier 3, for whatever reason, we have some students lagging in universal skills. And so this tier will look like much more individualized or even more intensive interventions. I think the most important thing to remember about tiered systems of support is that we will have students that will need all 3 tiers within their school day. So if we have a student that's receiving tier 3 interventions, it cannot be at the expense of tier 1. So if we have students being pulled out for an intervention in tier 3, it can't happen during tier 1 because they need all 3 tiers. So that's kind of a whole other training. And that's the art and science of how MTSS works within our schools. But that just gives you a little bit about our tiers. On the next slide. I know, sorry, I didn't know it was a. And those are just examples that fit into the tiers. This is a slide that just shows what MTSS department looks like inside PPS. This could look different in other districts depending on how they're organized. But for PPS, we have restorative justice within our team. Shar Hudson is our program manager. Unfortunately, she is out sick today. But we have Yusuf Leary, and he can introduce himself again when he comes up. But Yusuf is going to be talking a little bit about RJ today. We also have social emotional learning within our MTSS department. And Dr. Jill Bryant is here. She's an assistant director, and she's going to be talking a little bit about social emotional learning. We also, within our department, we support all of the systems, teaming structures and systems for climate and academic. And so Assistant Director Naomi Oram is going to come and talk a little bit about that. We also have student conduct and discipline that resides within the MTSS department. And I'm just going to take time at the end just to share a couple of slides that relate directly to discipline. And then we also have 2 more teams. They're not here with us tonight. We won't highlight them tonight, but I just want to let you know that they are in our team. We have Rapid Response, and that is a team that supports schools when we have students that are exhibiting tier 3 behaviors. And what that means is if we have students that are exhibiting unsafe behaviors, either to themselves or to others, then this is a team that can go and help respond. And then the last one, we have a team that supports, it's called a Fidelity of Implementation tool. That's a fancy word to say it's an assessment that helps to measure how we're doing as an MTSS in the district. So I think I'm going to turn this over to Jill.
Next. And maybe before Jill goes, I just wanted to introduce my colleague, who's a part of the superintendent's leadership team. He's our chief of Office of Student Support Services. This is Jay Booth.
I apologize for being late. We were already, so anyway, thank you for being here. And did my part, so I now will hand it back to Jill. Jill. Thank you.
Hey, hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite. As Chandra said, my name is Jill Bryant. I'm the Assistant Director of Social Emotional Learning. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm just very briefly going to share a little bit about social emotional learning in PPS. And so first thing that we want to clarify is that what is social emotional learning? That's a term that's thrown around and used in many different ways and contexts. I was trying to get away from that. I'm just using, I was trying to have my back to you. You outsmarted me. But in PPS, what is really important to us is that social emotional learning is not just something for our students. It's not just a curriculum to change student behavior. This is something that students and adults, the adults of the system, all the way up to the superintendent, are practicing, learning, developing throughout our lifetime. So we have a stance that the adults are co-learners, co-learners with the students. Now I have an iPhone too. The paparazzi is out tonight. I feel like I am. I'm gonna wear my dress. Anyway, so with social emotional learning, we're thinking about culture. So there is curriculum that we can give to students and share with students, learning skills and supporting those relationship skills, sense of belonging, agency, but also we're thinking about climate. So how do we support teachers as well as students in developing healthy identities, learning about emotions, goal setting, showing empathy, establishing relationships. And just a key point too is like this is about the collective, it's the community, it's the sense of belonging. And so we have professional development, curriculum, systems and structures to try to help move that work in the district. And this is our 4th year of a 5-year plan. And working on that, it's a big lift, but we feel we've made some good progress. So we have a lot more to go. The last piece is just to share this whole piece about transformative social emotional learning is we see social emotional learning as a lever, that's sort of a big word, but as a process to help support racial equity and social justice. Through social emotional learning, we can build those skills and the relationship and the communities necessary to engage in that hard work, to engage in the restorative justice practices and conversations, to interrupt hate speech. So we think it can help build that skill set for both the educator, the administrator, and the student. So lastly, just a few things that we're doing in the schools. And again, this is not district-wide yet. We're doing a rollout, but there's something called 3 signature practices that is slowly becoming district-wide that we would love to see kindergarten to 12th grade in all classrooms, that are very simple ways to build that community and connection through something called a warm welcome, where we have an activity that builds that connection, community, engaging activities, and then an optimistic closure. Again, that's just a quick way to connect as a class. It's not an exit ticket or a quiz, but that's something that we hope in the next year or two will be something that all students will see in their classrooms. Again, I mentioned professional learning. We have district-wide professional learning. For right now, it's for some of our district office people and for some of our teachers in some schools. Next year, that'll be moving out to all schools. And then we just did, the last 2 years, we've been working on adopting SEL curriculum that is aligned with both the district vision as well as this transformative social emotional learning. And I have a link there to what we've adopted, and we're pretty excited about it. And then, I don't know if we have any high schoolers that know about peace in schools, but right now that's our high school offering as an elective course. It's mindful studies. So my 3 minutes is up. I'll stop there and thanks for your attention.
So I'm not quite sure which is a good spot to stand in. I just want to make sure everybody can see me, but thank you all for being here tonight. And what I'm going to talk about is restorative justice. It's something you've probably heard over the last few years. It's been very prevalent within the school systems. And what we're trying to do is just transform how we approach discipline and transform how we respond to things in those times of accountability. So what we're looking to do is try to get into every school within our district to change those practices. One of the things that we're trying to displace is the school to prison pipeline. School to prison pipeline is where students get in trouble in school and they get so desensitized to that trouble that when they become adults, it's something that they're accustomed to, and they start to do those start to practice those things within their own lives. So it's important that we try to negate that as early as possible and try to disrupt those practices within the school building. Our team is the restorative justice team. We have 5 members on our team. Recently just gained a new member on our team. I am a specialist in place of our program manager, who is Shar Hudson. And what we're trying to do is get into every school and provide those services to where each student can have a voice within that conflict. They can understand their accountability within that, but also too, just to start to develop those tools of de-escalation and start to develop those tools to work through conflict and be able to have those communication tools so that when they do become adults, it's not something that's foreign to them. So we can go to the next slide. And as mentioned before, we also have tiers as well. Tier 1 is where we're kind of giving it to every student, doing community circles, making sure we're engaging every student at every single level. It's more generalized, just trying to get to know the students to build that rapport so we can really have some good relationship building. Tier 2 is more so specific to small student groups or one-on-one processes with other students. And Tier 3 is more so when we're doing re-entry. So when a student has been away from school for a long time, they've either been suspended, expelled, different things that may keep them out of the building. We want to have a re-entry conference to welcome them back in. So that takes the part of the community, part of the classroom, part of the educator, and the student to all participate in welcoming that student back. So those are some of the practices that we do, but I also, just being from Portland, Oregon, want to talk about what we can do to be preventative and try to be proactive in preventing some of the violence within the city that has been prevalent as of this. I think restorative justice is a great tool to provide that for students. And I'm a graduate of PPS myself, and I can say that I did not know what restorative justice was coming up as a student. And to now be able to provide students with this context and this information, when they're my age, they're going to have these tools that I think is going to also not only benefit our school system, but benefit our community. So restorative justice is very important. I know you probably all heard about it, but it's transformative. And I would encourage you and challenge you to do as much research about it and also implement it within your own homes. When you're doing it at home, it also stretches out into the community and into the schools. And that's where the practices take place. So thank you for that, and I appreciate your time.
On to the next slide. So with all of these components that are part of climate in the schools, I'm Naomi. I'm the assistant director for MTSS. I help oversee the systems and structures that help make these practices on the ground and implement it. So in every school in the district, we support the structures around school climate teams. So every school has a school climate team, and their role is to take all of these practices and implement school-wide, providing professional development and an action plan responding to data. And so a couple of examples of data that they might use will be the successful school survey. Hopefully everybody in here had the opportunity to complete the successful school survey as a parent, a staff member, or a student. And that is our opportunity to get student voice and for every school to reflect on that and look for trends and be able to respond to it in an action plan. And then we also have another inventory that we use, the culturally responsive tiered fidelity inventory. That is something that the staff complete to measure how they are implementing, at what level of implementation they are in this response. So every school creates a climate plan for every school year. And I included a sample in here. I think you all have a copy of this slide deck, but I included a specific school climate plan. You can dive into that one and see what they might include in there. That they'll include their common expectations across the school, their agreements that they use across the school, what their discipline and behavior matrix might look like. And this is shared with families and students at the beginning of every school year and posted on their website. And then the climate team works through that as a working document throughout the school year. They meet monthly and then create plans for acknowledgement and assemblies and other systems and structures. On top of that, they support monthly staff professional development. Once a month, there's one of the staff meetings is dedicated to school climate, and that can include social emotional learning. For some of our schools, it's restorative justice, professional development. And for other schools, it's a whole wide range of trauma-informed practices and anything that fits into what they've put into their climate. And then another practice that, if we go back, sorry. One other practice that we have across the district is every classroom teacher, every teacher should have an effective classroom practices plan. And I included a sample from one of our fourth grade teachers. I removed any identifying information in it, but what they do in this is that they go through a long professional learning at the beginning of every school year, a full day of learning, and they develop this practice plan. And it takes them through questions and reflections around social emotional learning, restorative justice practices, routines and procedures in a classroom that create a trauma-informed space. And then they make their plan for the year. So for example, here they're talking about shared agreements and the practice of making that. This is something we create as a community with our students. It's not the adult in the classroom telling the whole class this is what our agreements are. It should be the whole classroom together. And so they reflect on that. When are you going to do that? Where are you going to post it? How are you going to share this and keep revisiting it? And so on. So there's quite a few strategies in here, but it's what we hope they will use to set up for the whole year was going to be supportive for all of their students. Again, there's a copy in there for you all to be able, this is a template we provide to the school so they can all review that. And share.
I'll just keep it consistent so I don't have to keep moving. So I think we're almost at time. I just have a couple of slides to close that relate to the discipline data. It was my understanding that you had already had the data, so I wasn't going to dig into it too deeply. So I think I want to acknowledge and recognize there's a lot of great work happening across the district, and yet we have a lot of work ahead of us. And so this is a slide that's right out of the discipline data that you're receiving right now. It's from Dr. Adams. He's our Chief Research and Assessment and Accountability Officer. And so what this is showing is that PPS data is mirroring our national trend in that our Black students are 3.5 times proportionate in receiving referrals and exclusionary discipline. So what that means is here in Portland, our Black students make up about 8% of our student enrollment, and yet they're accounting for over 24% of referrals and exclusionary discipline, which is what makes that 3.5. Same with our Native American students, we're at about 2.5 times disproportionate. Latinx students, 1.24 times disproportionate. And then our students with disabilities are 2 times also disproportionate. Next slide, please. So some of the work that is coming out of our student conduct and discipline team that is beginning to disrupt this data, starting with the student conduct and discipline policy. This was implemented, actually it was approved last spring. And this policy has been rewritten to be more trauma informed. And it's completely rewritten. If you hear about policies being revised, I don't even use the word revised. This policy was kind of thrown out and we completely have rewritten it. And so it's much more trauma informed. It has a restorative approach, a restorative lens. And we were very intentional about looking at the preventative and the intervention versus punitive. If you think about the student conduct discipline policy, it's really that overarching guide for our discipline and how we approach discipline at PPS. And then you have this slide deck. Those are all links so that you could actually click onto those if you don't have those. So if you look at this as a flow chart, then we're going to go down to the next step. So the administrative directives were just recently implemented this year. And these directives accompany that discipline policy. So it's like a 40-page document, but what it is, it's really a step-by-step guide for our administrators to implement that policy. And then if you narrow it down even further, we have a district-wide behavior matrix that again serves as a guide to our administrators around behaviors and discipline. And then finally, our student rights and responsibilities handbook. This is where we communicate most of this information to our caregivers, our families, our students, and our staff. So I know I don't have time to go into those in detail, but I think that might be something that's on the next agenda. So unless Jay, if you have anything you want to close with, I think we are.
No,
concluding.
I guess all I would close with is student engagement, students being in classroom is very important to progress. What happens on the bus, and our vision is to disrupt the systems and practices that are impacting students. Consequently, adopt practices that will help do that. We're in very stages of implementation, but we're pushing forward to support all of our kids in being in class, belonging, engaging, and moving forward to graduating if they want to change trends that have been long-standing but need to change.
Thank you for your time.
So I think I'm going to turn over to Will now, who's going to kind of help facilitate a discussion about all the information that you've seen there. And right now, just so you know, we're getting you a physical copy of the slides so you can go back to those, but I think you're on your way. But yeah, this is an opportunity with the staff here, with the information that you have before, to ask questions, give us your feedback, and also share your experiences. And Will, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, we thought we would just open it up for first thoughts or just things as this group has been charged with really getting to what does this actually look like in our buildings, and from your perspective as community members, so just opening up with like first thoughts.
So I'm a parent, but also a veteran Portland Public Schools teacher, in Portland Public for 16 years. And this kind of data is always really hard to swallow and really triggering because it doesn't change. It's always been this since I've been part of the community here. And so of course it's mainly just really uncomfortable. I'm curious about how long RJ has been implemented. And I'd love to understand more about which programs in our schools are effectively using it. And maybe are there certain schools where the data doesn't look like this? Love to understand that a little bit more. So.
Oh, yeah, of course. So in terms of the implementation, I can speak directly because some of the work that I've done, I work directly with Cleveland High School. And Cleveland High School has now started a SRJ team, they call it Surge Team. And that's where we go in and we train the students. Every Wednesday we have pizza, just have them feel welcome, giving them restorative practices, giving them the training so that when they do have conflicts among the students, it's peer-to-peer conversation, it's peer-to-peer resolution. I think that if we're talking about really implementing this, then it has to start with the building, it has to start with people walking the halls. It's one thing for me to walk in and do great work, but it's another thing that's actually the culture of the school. So when Cleveland has that, I can see the development within that. And our goal is to try to make that widespread. I'm sure it's happening. I know it's happening at other schools as well, but I just wanted to speak directly to the school that I work with. They're doing a lot of great work. So I would encourage you to also ask them if you know anybody who like Cleveland. And I know there's a student here from Cleveland as well. The SRJ is a great team, and I would encourage you to just look into it. Those are some of the things we're trying to do. So thank you for asking.
I would say, as a restorative justice coordinator, the work personally that I've been doing at Beaumont, but not only just at Beaumont, but I had the opportunity because of trust within my principal to where I did some RJ work at Beverly Cleary, which is right down the street, which is better known as Fernwood, back in the day, and so my principal trusted me enough because they had a situation and, she's like, hey, Marte, do you mind going there and doing these things or whatever? And I was there for 3 days. And the work that I did at Beverly Cleary, with the kids and with the adults, pertaining to a certain situation, now they're thinking about how they can implement RJ into, because Beverly Cleary is a KQA school. And so now they're trying to figure out ways how they can implement RJ into their school, because not every school has an RJ coordinator. And I think that's something that we got to think about as a district, to have these opportunities for people to get in position to implement these things throughout the schools. Because what happens is if we only got certain people at 10 schools or 15 schools, with the other 20, 25 schools don't got it, then how are we going to be able to make the change that we want to make? You know what I mean? So I think just having, you know, kind of like we used to talk about, having that knowledge and surrounding yourself with people that can be able to help you with these practices, that way it becomes a culture thing. It becomes something that's a part of your school. And I know for me at my school at Beaumont, like RJ is like certain kids have handled certain situations on their own. And then I've had situations where I had to facilitate some things between the teacher and the student, or student to student. And even teachers are bringing me in to say, hey, Marte, can you come in my classroom, you know, on Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever day it is, to do a community circle. And it's not just about, oh, you know, my class is in trouble or they did something. It's just about how can we make this a normal thing, right? And so I like to start off having, you know, questions about, you know, what's your favorite snack, right? What's your favorite movie? What's right? So we get on the common ground. You know what I mean? And that's something that I've learned from Yusuf and Char and Charlie as well, you know, during the RJ work in our trainings, is how do we also do the RJ work, but we have to meet them where they at. And people say that all the time, but what does that look like? I think speaking the language, I think understanding where they're coming from. Vulnerability is a big, big thing. And it's hard for our kids to be vulnerable, especially middle school kids, you know what I mean, to be vulnerable and be able to express themselves in ways that they probably never have. And I think this year I've seen tremendous growth within our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders being vulnerable and speaking up about certain things that's bothering them, or certain things that they feel like, you know, that they want to change throughout the school. And so I think that all that has to do with the culture of what we're building at Beaumont when it comes to the restorative work, when it comes to having these bigger conversations. And I think trust is big too. And so I think as we talk about all of these things throughout the district, I think we have to make sure that we're making this a culture thing. You know what I mean? And not just something that's going to be here for 5 years and then disappear, or something that's going to be here for 3 years and disappear. We need this to be a culture throughout our schools, because if we're trying to end the school to prison pipeline, we're trying to prevent our kids from getting suspended and getting expelled and all these things, then we have to make it a culture. So if a kid, you know, that's having a troubled time or having a difficult time throughout the school, at least they will have the skill to be able to express, like, okay, well, I feel like I'm not being heard when I'm in the classroom, right? And we all know that some of these teachers are teaching 30, 40 kids in one classroom, right? So that means that teacher's not able to get to this certain kid who may be having these certain trouble, right? And so I think these are all things that plays a part in the RJ work and in the MTSS work, because I'm a part of the TSL team as well at Beaumont. And we just had a meeting, I think, last week. And, you know, these are things that we're constantly talking about, but also as somebody that's on the ground working in the trenches and the front lines with the kids and with the teachers, you know what I mean? I think I just want to see a bigger culture thing within our district, because it's working, in my opinion. I think it's working, and it depends on the person who's bringing that forefront. And my school building knows that one thing, if you have a conversation with Mr. Marte pertaining to this RJ work, it's 2 things: it's love and humanity. And I'm like, those are 2 things that we went away from in this country, in this world. That's a whole totally different conversation. But when you lead with love and when you lead with humanity, everything is going to follow itself. I think conversation and kids are, you know, relationships. That's big, right? And so I think these are all things that I feel like we got to continue to do if we want to see the results we want to see.
Any other first thoughts before we move to the next question?
I guess I'll share. You know, when I'm looking at national data, and the slide says PPS is trending with pretty much where trending with national data, right? But you know, we also know that PPS is on the national level is a leader, right? With RESJ and social justice embedded in the policy, and they're you know, I just read an article recently, like they're used as like, you know, something to look up with. How would you say in comparison like just from this, from the folks in the room, how the work of PBS is in regards to that national trend in RESJ? Is everybody on this sort of cities our size, cities with this kind of demographic? Is there some background that anybody knows?
I guess what I would say is that, like you saw in the discipline data, unfortunately, we are, trending pretty similar to other school districts. I think the challenge for PPS is exactly what Marte said, is that we've got a lot of bright, promising practices. And right now we're in the trying to sort of like make them coherent throughout the district to build that sort of like culture so that it sustains over time. So I agree with you. I think that most of our policies and revisions and rewrites are definitely more progressive, and probably we're ahead of that curve on the sort of like ideas, but I think our data is still lagging as we sort of work to implement this nationwide. I think district-wide, I think you talked about like, where are the bright spots? And I think that we are, that is the work that we're trying to sort of find, like those areas of positive medians, and then to really sort of study those. And a lot of that does sort of take place not only in just looking at discipline data, but looking at all of the corresponding school climate and other initiatives to support a sense of belonging. So it becomes difficult to sort of like unbraid, because we're intentionally trying to braid all these strategies together to make it, a better place for students, particularly students of color.
Yeah, I see, just in my experience with racial equity work, it's a building culture is a long-term commitment. And there comes a tipping point when the numbers start changing. And so I appreciate the work and the consistency, because sometimes the data isn't really telling the story of the work on the ground. So I'm definitely appreciative of this, the tenacity and persistence, because there is eventually a tipping point. That culture changes and the data changes.
Naomi and Chandra, I think, made a plug for the student success survey. And I think that's some of the places where we might get some other stories. So we get the discipline data, which is disheartening, like you said, but in the student success survey, there are questions around like, what's the impression of a student's relationship with their teacher? What's the relation, like, do you feel like the adults in the school system care about you, know who you are? As a parent, do you feel like, and so there are a lot of those questions that we can start to map out and start to see how that relates to building that culture. So I don't know if any of our students, I'm really curious, as you look at this data and you think about your experience in schools, does what we've talked about ring true, or are you seeing this in action? Do you recognize our, like, Marte and Yusuf and some of the RJ coordinators?
Our school, I don't think has an RJ program or anything RJ related, but I do think that there is a lot of kids, I think, that do feel underrepresented or not listened to in classes. And a lot of times teachers just can't really, like you said, they can't really work one-on-one with them because they are working with hundreds of kids a day. Maybe not.
It's right. It's 100.
And I think that's very hard for kids. And because the kids get more frustrated at the teachers get more frustrated at kids, and this just gets more, just builds up more and more. And then it becomes, even more of a problem for everybody, including that one student who is doing those things, feeling that way.
You kind of see it like escalate. Delaney?
Yeah, so good afternoon.
Hi, thanks.
Maybe we should have a RJ for me coming in late. And so my name is Colini Fusitoa. I'm with ERCO. So I like this move to adopt to have it RJ be part of the culture. This is why. But to me, I would like to expand it outside or in-house to educate our families. Speaking for the Pacific Island community, when we're coming in with the parents for an expulsion incident, you know, we're gonna be hearing what, you know, our children was doing. This happened not too long ago. It was a fight incident. When you're hearing a report, the parents are already punishing their child because they're the one that's doing the damage, and that's all that's in the report. And so before there's a discipline that's given, you know, either for or against, the parents is looking, wait until we get home. So because this is what they're hearing. So I feel that it should be a culture-wide, but also to educate our community. I've sat in with RJ with a family, and they were surprised. They go, wow, they give us so much freedom. They give us so much, you know, space to voice, you know, because in their mind, we'll walk in, this is what happened, and this is the discipline. Thank you. I'll go home and I'll hit my kid, and colleagues out there to look because I'm a monetary report. I wasn't there. So for them, they're shocked that all this rights and space for you to voice and advocate for your kid was shocking for them. So they participated, but if there were an education opportunity prior, they would come prep and advocate for their children. And because, you know, with our culture, we apologize, you know, when things happen, we apologize, but that's usually taking it as admission of guilt. So I think we should expand it, and because it's moving forward, once it becomes, you know, you mentioned maybe a couple of years becomes norm. By that time, the community is way behind. So I think it's time to, you know, have a community education piece to go along with the in-house, you know, building it as a culture.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think Yusuf spoke on that really beautifully around if we can do this in our homes and in our communities, like what is the possibility of not seeing the unfortunate violence that we're currently living through. So I think you brought it right back to Yusuf.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that point that you made. I think it's also important to understand the differences culturally and how we're doing restorative justice culturally. Very similar. I can speak for my household, my culture, to where restorative justice maybe wasn't the first option to handling accountability of discipline. But although we can't necessarily demand that the community come in and learn what we are trying to do with the practices, we can provide space for them to come in. But also, again, as I said earlier, it's important that these students can learn these skill sets so that when they go home and they do have this conflict, they can say, we can handle this differently. And it might be hard for some parents to hear, but a student telling a parent that, hey, we can do this differently, we can think about this differently, and start to shift the culture within their own household is even more phenomenal and transformative than anything we could do inside the school. So although we can't necessarily bring the family and the community into the building every single day to teach them the trainings, the students can have those tools and they can then bring them home and then allow their household to learn what's going on. So I think there are ways that we can do it, but we have to continue to be creative about it. So bringing up questions like that is a great way to start. So thank you.
Yeah, just to briefly add is with the, I don't think you were here when I was talking about social emotional learning, but of the programs that we've have adopted, they have a home component because it's the same thing as what the students are learning in terms of these skills that help friendship, with connection, relationship, that then we can also bring that to home so that there's this community, there's really a dialogue as well, so that school can learn from the families in different communities as well as home learning from school, having that same.
I also see, you know, as a partner in this group, you know, lady, I think there's room for more partnership, as we have access for, from Step Up, we have access to 400 students and families, that we can also start reaching families from community partners and start like doing some of this work as well, in partnerships. So,
I think to hit real quick to his point too, I think when we talk about restorative justice and restorative work, I think whatever R word we missing is reflection, reflect, right? To restore is to reflect. And I think for our families, particularly in this situation, it gives them opportunity to reflect on how it was for them growing up, and then how we can change that, and how we could, and shift it, right? And I think that's the biggest thing, and for our kids as well, right? For them to reflect and say, dang, maybe I should have a different approach to the situation. It's like, okay, well, maybe I could handle the situation different. So I think to restore is to reflect as well. And I think that's something that we got to keep in mind as we do this work throughout the district, is to restore is to reflect. So let's reflect on, like this, like, the whole disciplinary things and all of these things. Okay, now reflecting on that. Okay, now let's restore. You know what I mean? So now we got a chance to reflect on all of this data and all these things that we see. So now we got a chance to restore the work as well. So I think, providing that opportunity for our families to reflect and be like, dang, this is a different approach. It's a new time. It's a different day. You know what I mean? So, like things are changing. You know what I mean? These students and these kids that we're working with, they're super bright. They're super open. They're aware about what's going on. And I think why we have that momentum and why we have their attention, why not shift that mindset as well to reflect and to restore all in one. So I think that's something that, we all can keep in mind. When we talk about partnerships, we talk about families, we talking about our schools, and we talking about just, us as a whole. You know what I mean? I think that's a key thing. I think when I'm hearing restorative work, when I think about that, when I think about just the work that I do and the work that so many of us do, that's on the ground, like you said, don't get a chance to really see that data, on the ground. But we do get a chance to reflect and then to restore. So that's something I think we should all keep in mind as well.
Thank you all. One more thing. So clarifying just how the successful schools survey data is used. That's typically used to help develop climate policy, different sites. Is that right? Is that what you were saying? The successful school, the climate action plan. That's what you're saying. Okay. So what we come across at Ockley is that we don't have a lot of family voice, and we don't have a lot of people filling out those surveys. And I want to know what we can work on, how we can work on elevating non-dominant voices that we're not hearing back from. There's maybe 25% of families total fill out the survey. It's really low at our school, and then within that. Our non-dominant families are extremely poorly represented. And of course, like you're talking about, family is so key. And what are we looking at in terms of including and supporting those key relationships with each other?
Yeah, so this is very, very, very common, just for your school, but just from the Pacific Island community. Very, very common. You're not going to go on your online survey. You're not going to, do the survey that you're sending at home. You're not going to, submit the one that you're sending it on the mail. So because of our partnership with URCO and PBS, so we provide culture specific. So we're the one that's going in to the house, face to face with the families, sitting down, explaining, the purpose of it, and then going through during the survey. And once, we hit a few families, then their network goes into the community, and we don't have to go to everybody else. And they're the one that's going to do the wildfire of sending the messages. So that's what's been working for, for our program, providing culture specific. Because I'm not showing up, with a clipboard and that looks mainstream, and then knock on the door and they're like, nobody's home. Well, I said something.
Thank you for that. Actually, that was like our last question before our next topic was knowing that this group's kind of drive and mission is to advise PPS on these big changes, like Jeremy's point, like we are really trying to do some really progressive changes when you think about like the national landscape. There's currently cities and states that are saying T-cell is bad. And so in that though, what we're also hearing is that we don't communicate it very well, or we don't like get it to families really well, or to the larger community. Thank you for folks in this room who don't work with PPS. This was like some really new learning. So as you all are charged with like advising, what are some ways that you think, how do we like really get this out more, really elevate the work that we're trying to do so that families really know the why, right? Like everyone gets sick surveys. So how do we really articulate the why behind this survey, right? So that was a question for you all as like, and students, like, I know sometimes you don't even know that maybe the discipline matrix changed. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So just, that was the next question, curiosity for you all.
I think the outside partnerships is big because they're able to reach the families that we want to reach in a different way, right? I'm an SCI kid from 2nd grade all the way up till even now I work for them part-time as well. I do summer programs with them, right? And so a program like SCI, like self-enhancement, you know, the coordinators that's on the ground working at Ockley, Tubman, and George, the coordinators are able to get that information to the parents because it's received it. You know what I'm saying? Like they're the coordinators and the people that's working directly with their kids. There are people that's working directly with the teachers and the admin at the school. And so now if I'm a coordinator at SCI, for example, and I'm a coordinator at Ockley Green, and I want to get these surveys and get these things, I have a relationship with all my kids on my caseload and their parents and their families. So I'm able to express to them and get that information and say, hey, look, this is important. Like if you want, because it's generation after generation, how many times have we ran into a teacher that said, oh, you taught my mom, you taught my dad, you taught my cousin, he's right. That's community, that's family. So the more and more we have people that are able to get inside those spaces, like you said, with the outside partnerships, that's how we get that message across, because we're able to reach them at a level. It's like, you know, if you go talk to the family and say, hey, you know, this is why this is important. This is why we need this information. The parents are most likely gonna be like, you know what, because I trust you, because I know you have my child's best interest, and I know you have my family's best interest, I'm gonna listen and I'm gonna get this opportunity. So I think that trust, again, is big, and the outside partnerships, you know, can touch areas that the schools, you know, within can't, in my opinion.
Yeah, so speaking as a partner, our parent engagement, I feel it should be more percentage-wise with the contract. So just increasing parent engagement, and even just like this particular contract is just parent engagement, you know, because without community, it's family, you know, family, just like everybody else. But this is just, you know, this is how you get the movie. You know, you hit the families, and then it goes out, so forth. So partners is good, but as a partner, I think more funded or very engaged.
I think those two things are important, partnerships and family involvement, of course, but I'm always listening for like, where's the gap? Because I'm like watching the presentation, hearing everybody talk. For me, what sticks out is if you really want to move this work forward, you've got to have an incentive for the staff that students are touching base with the most, which are teachers and staff in the building every day. It's great if students get to connect with Marte. It's great if Yusuf comes into Cleveland. But at the end of the day, students are spending the most time with teachers. And one, there's no incentive for them to do any of this. And two, there's no consequences if they don't. So teachers can choose to step away, walk away. Argument between students results in a fight that a teacher was aware of and around. They walk away, don't do anything about it. And then who has the consequences and whose expulsion hearing am I sitting in? The student, not the teacher that walked away. So the biggest gap that I'm seeing right now and hearing from this conversation is that one, there's no incentive for staff including administrators in the buildings, and two, there's no consequences when they don't do it. The people who are being hurt by that are the students. And that's where the problem lies. And until we have incentives and consequences for the staff, for the adults, I mean, we're gonna see some wins at Cleveland, we're gonna see some at Beaumont. But what about McDaniel? What about Jefferson, Roosevelt? Roseway Heights, where families describe it as a gladiator school. Like, nothing's gonna change until the people in the building on a daily basis who have the most contact with students change.
Thanks, I appreciate that, and I think that's what to Jill's point, right? Is that you can't do SEL without the adult students. So that's what the big push is, that adult learning and that accountability. I think that this group in particular, with the way that you are positioned, both within like our belief of PPS, but also with the Senate bill that created this, really gives us an agency to start like unpacking what that could even look like. Thank you. This discussion's been awesome, and I think we could keep talking about it, and I want to honor folks' time because this is a set meeting. And so why don't you move on to the next topic that you all wanted to talk about tonight. I do want to honor like MTSS. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome. If you would like to go home and have dinner, I understand. I don't blame you. Oh, yes, of course, Jay.
You know, I just wanted to communicate appreciation to everybody for the feedback related to this. This work is important. It's hugely important to all of us. It's a passion. We have highly skilled practitioners that care deeply, and they do it because it's the right. And I just want to appreciation to everybody for engaging with us and giving us feedback, and supporting us, and supporting the work, and to the staff on my team. It doesn't happen without them. They're amazing. So across the board.
Thanks, Jay.
So I'll introduce our next speaker, which you already know is Will Fernandez, but one of the things, just some context, after the 2016 election, Portland, like many other communities, saw an uptick in reported incidents of bias or in anonymous hate speech. And so at the district, when I started in 2018, we started seeing that same sort of uptick. And so working with our principal supervisors and our principals, we wanted to start to develop some protocols on how to respond to different acts of hate speech. And at the same time, we worked with organizations like Western State Center that developed a toolkit, Learning for Justice, which is formerly Teaching for Nonviolence, which developed a toolkit, as well as some training that happened through the National Equity Project. And so we have been, over the last several years, really trying to develop not only ways to report it, because this is something that goes underreported. In our community, there's an organization and a movement called PUA, Portlanders United Against Hate, who Colini and probably our community partners know about, where there is an underreporting of these types of incidents. And so we wanted to try to think about how we can start to collect this information, analyze the information, at the same time develop some opportunities to respond. So Will's gonna go over what we've been working on to date, and then we'll have some more discussion. So I'll turn it over to Will.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with, and I think to Danny's point is, we launched a live reporting tool in 2019. And when you look at the data, two things are gonna be, I think, pretty prevalent is that it's gonna feel like there's underreporting, given what we know to be true in our day in and day out experiences, especially sitting in a room with that's primarily people of color. I feel like you are probably having some feelings when you look at this, and that is okay. And then also that currently with the reporting it needs to be reported. So we only have the data that we have. And then just a side noticing is that in March 2020, we stopped getting reports. That was our last report of the 2019-2020 school year. In 2020 to 2021, we were completely remote. We only had 7. And our first full year back in person, we had 32 instances reported. And currently to date, we have 11. So.
Just to add some context, sorry, Will, that this basically tracks anonymous incidents of hate. So these are sort of writings on the bathroom wall or incidents like that. We have a different reporting and different responses for in person or when the person is known. But we wanted to track these. We also have like pictures. We've shared this information with the Department of Justice. They have a statewide sort of database where they're tracking this as well. And one thing I will say is that we are collecting the most information. If you look at the city of Portland's sort of like responses, we have, and we know that this is an underreporting, we have the most robust reporting. So we've been working with the state and with our local legislators to think about what are ways that we can change some of the policies around making reporting less difficult and also tracking the severity of it.
So with that is some context for everybody. So Every Student Belongs, the Anti-Racist Interpretations Communities. So ODE adopted a statewide policy, which originally was called All Students Belong, that's now called Every Student Belongs. And that was the banning of hate symbols in all public education, public institutions. So they said that it was like the big 3, which is the swastika, the noose, and the Confederate flag. And it was required that all school districts adopt a similar policy. So then PBS passed the Anti-Racist, Anti-Oppression School Communities policy. And ours is a little different than just what ODE asked us to do. So what we said is that we wanted to extend the policy to cover all hate symbols that are in the ADL database. So something that an example would be Pepe the Frog was really prevalent during when we were in isolation at home. So if a student had that as like a symbol or it was like used as a meme, we would address it because it is in the ADL database. So we expanded out past just the swastika using the Confederate flag. Our policy is also rooted in restorative practices. The Every Student Belong policy does say that we are a learning institution and that we should give folks the ability to like learn from and redirect and grow. And then
Sorry, Will.
oh, you're fine.
Danny asked me to refresh it, so I'm refreshed.
Oh, okay.
Oops.
I mean, what I can say is the policy also aligns with our hate speech protocols, which are can be found on our website. Sorry, y'all. This happens.
Sorry.
And that we're currently working on a administrative directive. So as Chandra explained earlier, we have a policy that's just that overarching umbrella. And then what is currently being worked on is the administrative directive, which is really that how-to for building admin. And in the administrative directive development, it's a cross-departmental work group that is really trying to create a comprehensive set of responses for like the different types of bias incidences. Because currently we have one set response, and what we're really learning is that different responses might need different, or different actions might need different responses. And how do we also do that with fidelity across the districts?
We've also linked there to our website that lays out the hate speech protocols, that has information from ODE about the Every Student Belongs policy and their toolkit. And then we also have links to the Anti-Defamation League's database of hate symbols. When we rolled out our protocols, one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that not only like building leaders and principals knew about these symbols, but we worked with our facilities and operations team. And so every custodian, who are often on the front lines of seeing some of these symbols they have received a training about this, and so they can see the symbols, and it's something that they refer to pretty regularly in terms of making sure that as they're, ensuring that our facilities are safe and clean, that this is something that they know about. And so a lot of the reports of our anonymous acts of hate speech have come from custodians who, are maybe doing cleaning the site, and then they see the symbol, and they're right on sort of taking a picture, removing it, notifying the principal, and following their protocols.
And our hope for tonight was not only to share this information with you, but as we're really thinking about an administrative directive and something that we don't with Fidelity, is how do we, as a community, really make sure that folks are feeling as though the district is really responding in a way that feels like responsive to the community, responsive to the folks that are harmed, responsive to those who may be, if it is a known harmer. So really having that discussion, especially from the students in our buildings who might see these things every day, potentially, or might hear things that we don't get a chance to hear from where we sit.
Yeah, at Cleveland, especially this year, there have been like multiple incidents of hate speech or hate symbols, and it's like it just feels like a cycle, like something out, not very detailed, and then people get frustrated because there's not that much information, and then gets talked about for maybe a day, and then it gets forgot about, and then something else happens, and then it's just like a cycle that keeps happening. I think like going back to like the incident reports, I feel like a lot of students might not know exactly like maybe how to report it, or they might think like, oh, that's something else to report it, like I don't need to do it. Or they might not think it's that big a deal because maybe they're not like educated. Also about the hate speech response in the district, I feel like students are frustrated because we don't get like that many details, and that's because they don't know what the policy is or what the protocols are. So I think like just like letting students know like more about the policy, I feel like that'll make their like mind more like what
Thanks. So I'm hearing is like really more education for students around all of this, and even like reporting.
Our school has been kind of like that. There's been multiple incidents of multiple different things involving hate speech. And I think just in general, we need to have more action of like about these things, like more responses to this. Because you're right, because they have like a talk during homeroom, like hour-long talk per day, and then that's it. I think there should be a lot more cracking down on these, because it happens every day. Because we've been having these multiple times.
and also I feel like because like how many incidents have happened like at Cleveland, like how many times does it have to happen for something to change? It's like it feels like after something happens, like nothing actually gets like implemented or changed.
So what I'm really hearing is like some proactive, we got to get a little bit of some proactive work, and then some consistent work. It sounds like we do a lot of like in the moment, and then not kind of that follow through with the after work.
I'm glad we're not sitting here going, well, it was 32 last year and then this year's 11. We're doing great.
Yeah, no.
We kind of know what's going on the ground.
Yeah, yes.
So Jay and his team is part of this group that are working on like the response. And one of the things that we're trying to sort of think about is how do we align every type of reporting so that it's consistent, so that students, teachers, principals kind of know how to report incidents. So one of the things that the district is starting to look to invest in is basically like a sort of consistent reporting tool. So like for Title IX or like, you know, gender-based discrimination, we want to make sure that we're following kind of like the same reporting so that it's consistent, but then have responses that are tailored to the specific type of you know, bias incident. So I think that's one thing that we're thinking about. And so I guess I have a question. Do you feel like I know that there's been a lot of work around like some of the Title IX reporting. Do you feel like, is there feedback about that? Like, is that a good thing to follow? Have you been happy with the way that you know and you've been in education about that?
At Cleveland, there's a class called consent culture, and they kind of it's like a student-led run class, and I think they have done a good job about like they put like posters up on like how to report an incident, and then they have like an Instagram account. They make like little videos like, oh, go to this office, talk to this person. Although there was one incident, someone reported Title IX and like a teacher, and like they didn't do anything about it. So that was just like one incident, but yeah.
Thanks, that's really good feedback. Thanks for like agreeing.
Well, sorry. Also, I know that not at all high schools there's like consent culture. Like it like takes like certain like amount of students to be able to like create the class. Not every high school has opportunity.
That goes back to what one thing saying, like having, it's great to have that the one school, but what about the other ones?
I think it's really important to shift the culture around reporting too, because there's some anxiety for students around reporting. And as mentioned, I think if students know the policies and they know the process behind reporting, they can feel a little bit more comforted in that. There might be some distrust, as mentioned before, that sometimes things don't happen. And so there's that notion to just not do anything, just say, oh, it's not gonna happen anyway. So I'm just trying to think around ways that we can make it more comfortable for students to actually want to report and not feel the emotional or social anxiety that may come from that. So I know just for some of the students I work with, when I ask them specific questions about details and things, they're like, oh, well, I'm not saying anything because I don't want to have people know that I said something, have people look at me this way. So just trying to build some comfort around that. And that may sit differently culturally, but I think if we can find a way to streamline that for students, and I think it starts with allowing them to know what's going to take place. It'd be a great thing.
Part of that job title too, I think, you know, RJ coordinator is student success advocate. But my job, my duty is to make sure that these students be heard. And I take trust very seriously. And I've been blessed and grateful for the opportunity for kids to be able to trust me. It's very, very tough information. That's even tough for me to take in, just because it's like, how do I go about it? You know what I mean? How do I take in all this information and try to best support them and their family, or best support them in general? I think that trust, and I think just, you know, like you said too, just having like students knowing that process. You know what I'm saying? Just like Yusuf said, like, you know, that whole culture of, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to say nothing. Well, that's the reason why we're in what we in, because ain't nobody saying that. You feel me? So it's like, that's the reason why we're in the climate we in with this world. That's the climate we in. Just our societies, because nobody's speaking up. Everybody's just, we just gonna just let things happen. Like, nah, that hasn't been working. And so I think that trust between an adult and a kid or a student plays a big part in that. Hey, Mr. Marte, can I talk to you? Yeah, what's up? Boom, tell me information. They already know when they come to me, they know that their voice is gonna be heard. I had a student tell me today, which I was very appreciative for, because sometimes I get so caught up in my work, and I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. She said, I know. She was like, one of our students had a tough time, just family and all these things. And she said, I know I can come to you, Mr. March. I go to you. I go to, another staff member in the building, because I know you have my back. I know you got my best interest, and I know that you're going to advocate for me. She said that out of her own mouth as a seventh grader. And for me, I don't take that lightly, because that means she trusts me with everything. basically, because at the end of the day, I spend 7, 8 hours with these kids and I'm with them more than they with their parents, to be honest, right? And so to have that goes back to what? Community, family, and being and having that trust. I think if they have that trust with somebody throughout the school, they're able to report and say, nah, this ain't right. And I know Mr. Martin, or I know somebody in the building that I trust is gonna make sure that something happens, you know, in terms of conversation, in terms of potential discipline, depending on how severe it is or whatever, right? It has to be zero tolerance for hate speech, fair point blank. You know what I mean? And I think that this is a way how we kind of strategize on how we can go about that in a way that benefits everybody. It benefits, most importantly, our students to be able to speak out, because you know our students and our just our people in general has been silenced for so long, and I think it's time to start speaking up. And the more we speak up, the more difference we can make within our school, that Cleveland, and that Jeff, and that Ockley, and that Kellogg, you know what I mean, and all these different schools. I think some of that, if that makes sense, that kind of.
That makes total sense. I mean, I'm hearing everyone say there needs to be some more transparency with young people, access, and then also I think is some real intentional work with adults. So no matter what, so they don't have a youth, right? No matter what adult you go to, they'll be reported and handled and done each time the same way. Great feedback, and that's the work for us to do, to take back and feel. I've just looked at my watch and
We'll talk about.
sorry, we went way over. We have 2 minutes left of this meeting. I apologize.
That's, this is really, I just want to thank our CAC members for participating and for going through all the data. So in terms of next steps, we would love to continue to make this meeting like as great as possible for the members. So this was our first time where we were sort of like trying to make that balance of like, here's some information, here's some resources, and also time for discussion. So we would love in the feedback form, if you can tell us like, are we hitting the right balance? Do you want less time for presenting, more time presenting, more information, more pre-information, more post-information? How, so we'd love for you to fill out this feedback form, including the snacks. I'm seeing maybe we don't like onions. So that's okay. We'll get the snacks right. The other thing is our next meeting is June 28th from 5:30 to 7. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call the fabulous Lydia. And we have our website, and I just want to thank you so much. This is really, really helpful. As you know, these meetings are public, so these are on the website. So your colleagues who weren't able to make it, they'll able to see this. Our superintendent, our board members, you know, they all are watching this on the YouTube channel. So we'll send you the link to this so you can review if you want. And then if there's something that you didn't get to say, or if there's something that you want to kind of go back to, and it's not, you know, caught on the feedback form, please don't hesitate to contact Lydia or to contact really any of us. And, you know, I just want to also thank Jay and his team for, you know, staying with us and being so open. And I thought they presented really complex information in a really short amount of time. We were like, not too much. So they did a great job. And so just thanks everyone. It's really nice to see you again. And you know, we want this committee to work for you. And so please give us feedback and we'll continue to make this happen. So happy almost Friday.
It's Friday.
Almost weekend. Thank you, everyone.